Now, our second story for this episode of the Rolling Stone takes us once again to the wild, woolly world of the 2020 presidential election, and once again, we are talking about Pete Buttigieg. Okay, I feel kind of sorry for him because I feel like I'm kind of picking on him because of all of the candidates on the left for this presidential cycle. We have talked several times about Pete Buttigieg, and I know for certain that we've talked about him more than any other candidate who is running for president. That's partially because he is the most radical person on the left running for president, and that's saying a lot when you've got a full-blown socialist, a washed-up former vice president who doesn't know what state he's in or what office he's running for, and a serial liar who couldn't be honest about her ethnicity, her dad's job, her job, or where she sent her kids to school. That's saying something when you can say definitely that this person is the most radical of the bunch. But Buttigieg is, right? Every time numerous times, I guess I should say, when he opines on a subject, when he's asked to defend a position, he simply reconfirms his own radicalness, saying that a baby isn't a person until he's taken his first breath, saying that every person, okay, regardless of any reasons that they had, who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 is more than likely a racist. His non-logical justification for abortion, right? That it should be up to the woman to decide if she wants an abortion or not. All of these are examples of his radicalness. And this past week, when he was at a rally in Aurora, Colorado, he proved it again, okay? Because the crowd at this rally in Aurora, Colorado, they were writing out questions, and attendants in the audience, were gathering them up, taking them to the stage, and Buttigieg was kind of, choosing them and then reading them out loud. And one of the questions that he got said this, quote, "Would you help me telling the world that I'm gay too? I want to be brave like you." Okay? And then, that was the question. And then Buttigieg kind of broke protocol because he didn't just answer the question. He actually called down the person who wrote the question. And it turned out that the person who wrote that question, a guy by the name of Zachery Ro, wasn't even really a guy. He was a kid who was 9 years old, who came down onto the stage with his mother. Now, first things first, okay? Maybe it's just my cynical nature, but I have a really tough time believing that this actually happened the way we are supposed to believe it happened. We are supposed to believe that a 9-year-old kid, okay, wrote this question, okay, asking Pete Buttigieg to help him come out as gay to the world, even though, everyone does it now, right? That's one of the most socially acceptable things that you can do now. You are assured, right? You are assured of applause and validation from all of the people who matter, from the entire culture, if you come out as any member of the LGBTQIA2 plus whatever community, right? So there's that. There's the idea that this 9-year-old boy specifically wanted Pete Buttigieg to help him come out as gay because he wants to be brave like him. There's that. There's the fact that of all of these questions, Buttigieg simply happened to choose that one, right? And then he brought this kid down when that wasn't part of the protocol at all. No one else who asked questions, as far as I know, were brought down to the stage that night. Just this kid who asked this specific question. And the reason why I am more and more convinced, the more and more that I think about it, the more I am convinced that this was all staged, is because of this little fact, okay? Buttigieg's campaign is in trouble. Buttigieg's campaign is in trouble. He's been doing horribly in the primaries. He says that he won the Iowa caucus. Really, the party just gave that to him. The real winner of that was Bernie Sanders. Sanders didn't win it by much, but Bernie Sanders actually won. And after that, after Iowa, Buttigieg hasn't won any primary or any caucus. He is in trouble. More than that, he is in trouble with minority Democrat voters, which is a real I don't know, what, cruel irony, poetic justice, you tell me, as the Penguin tells Max Schreck, Christopher Walken in Batman Returns. It's either a cruel irony or poetic justice that Pete Buttigieg, right, who is the only self-proclaimed minority as a self-identified gay man running for president now, who is doing horribly among minority voters. I believe right now he still has 0% with black Democrat voters, and even people in the LGBTQIA2+ community are getting after him because they say that he's not queer enough. He doesn't represent them. Gosh darn it. Right? He's just not radical enough, and he's in that sense, because he's not really a queer man. He might be gay, but he's not queer. And that's what counts today. So his campaign is in trouble. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, like lightning from a clear bolt of sky, lightning from the clear sky, I should say, comes this 9-year-old kid who says, I'm gay, help me come out because I want to be brave like you, at this huge rally right when he really needs to shore up points, right, with minorities. He really needs to prove his intersectional bona fides, and he really needs to do this so he can actually start maybe winning a primary or a caucus or two before he really has to throw in the towel and say, yeah, okay, people just aren't into me or my campaign. Better luck next time, okay? All of that makes me very suspicious about the optics of this, especially when you think that his campaign has already gotten in trouble for this. There was not a big deal made about this, but there was a kerfuffle a couple of months back because on his campaign website, on one section, there was a picture of a black mother and her children. I believe it was the part where he was talking about his plan for minorities, including black Americans, right? And so, yeah, you thought, sure, the picture's right there. His campaign, is probably going around. They found a supporter or someone, and they asked her permission. They took a picture of her and her family for campaign purposes, for the website, right? No big deal. Except when we found out that that picture was actually stock footage from Africa. Yeah, his campaign basically went onto Google Images and searched, black mother with family and said, hey, that picture looks congenial. That picture looks good. Let's put that onto the website. I mean, oh my gosh, it was so lazy. It was so lame. And it was the real word is deceitful. That's the word, deceitful. So Buttigieg has not been, he and his campaign, they have not been above playing these optic games with people before, which again, just makes me, reconfirms my suspicion that not all is as it seemed here at this political rally. Okay? So that's the first thing. Okay? That's really the first thing. Okay? And the second thing, okay, is what Buttigieg said to 9-year-old Zachery Ro after he brought him and his mom down on stage. Okay, Buttigieg said, quote, "The first thing is that it won't always be easy, but that's okay because you know who you are. And that's really important because when you know who you are, you have a center of gravity that can hold you together when all kinds of chaos is happening around you. When I was trying to figure out who I was afraid that who I was might mean that I could never make a difference. And what wound up happening instead is that it's a huge part of the difference I get to make." Okay? Now, in light of that passage, I first want to point out attention again to the fact that Zachery Ro is 9 years old. And that's important because Professor Robert A.J. Gagnon pointed this out on Facebook. He said that at that young age, okay, before little Zachery has even gone through puberty, sexual desires and sexual feelings, they're tumultuous. They're going through a sense of flux because you're leaving childhood and you are on the verge of the change that will kind of take you to adulthood, right? Everything is kind of chaos inside of you and outside of you. Heck, I still have, remember what it was kind of like, right on the onset of puberty. I wouldn't go through that again for $1 million. For $5 million? Yes, I would. Gladly. Okay? But nothing for less than that. But not for less than that. And actually, one Twitter user, Kim, okay, that's her username on Twitter, she really hit the nail on the head, okay, when she said this, quote, "It sounds very much like it was his idea, Zachery's, but I think if my son had the same idea, I would tell him no, that he was too young to talk to strangers about his sexual orientation in front of news cameras." Yeah. Because what Pete Buttigieg pretty much did is turn this kid into a political prop so that he could win intersectional brownie points in some dire hope of, boosting up his campaign so that it doesn't sink like the Titanic. Okay? So there's all that. But what Buttigieg actually did here too, but besides using Zachery and his family, his mom and everything as a prop, besides more than likely staging this event to turn them into props, turn Zachery, his mom, and his whole family into props, is this. He has now made Zachery's sexual desires the center of gravity for his entire personhood. That's the thing. Because Buttigieg said, you know who you are. You have a center of gravity that can hold you together. He's talking about, who Zachery in the future wants to bang. Okay? To put it crudely. That's his center of gravity. That is who he is. The core and essence of who he is determined by whom he is attracted to have sex with. Now, that is one of the biggest lies, not just of the LGBTQ 2+ whatever community, but also the entire sexual revolution itself. Because the truth, because those two things, sexual revolution and the LGBTQIA 2+ movement, of which is an offshoot of the sexual revolution itself, their big lie is that we are nothing but desires. Okay, that's basically what we are reducible down to. That is our lowest common denominator. When you scrape away everything else, we are just a bundle of desires. And whatever desire is the strongest. So with most people, again, people would say that is the sex drive, because it is biological, it's necessary, and also not incoincidentally because it's also one of the most fun ones to actually satisfy, if you know what I mean, then, that's all that we are. That is the core and essence of who we are. Problem is, we are more than just our desires. I mean, if we're going to take the classical definition of man, that man is a rational animal, which goes all the way back to my man Aristotle, then our desires are not nearly as important as all that. The real important thing is growing, feeding, developing, exercising our rationality. And again, that's not simply rationality in the shallow, narrow version that we have today, where it's almost like computer-like mathematical thinking. No. It's language, it's poetry, it's imagination, right? It's just knowledge in and of itself, exercising that in all manner, shape, and form, our rational nature, right? Because, again, animals have desires too. Animals do. You could even say, for a sense, that plants have desires, because we all have this desire to survive, and plants will, go towards the sun. They will stretch out for water and everything else. So you could say that even they have a desire to live. It's biologically ingrained in every living thing to live, right? So we are more than just our desires. We are rational animals, for a man specifically. But there's another component to that too, because if you want to say that we are just desires, that a desire is the core and center of who we are, then that leads to several things too, because then what desire are we actually talking about? Because we have several desires. When I'm hungry, right, I have the desire for food. When I'm thirsty, I have the desire to drink something, whether that's water or milk, right? When I'm in pain, I have the desire to be taken out of that pain, right? Whether it's through Tylenol, whether it's through a shot, or whatever. We have a desire for comfort. We have a desire for safety, right? We have a desire for all of these things. Which desire actually becomes the core of who we are? Do we have to choose? But before we choose, right? Before we know who we are, is there even a you which can decide which desire that we want to make the core of who we are? Not only that, but once that desire is sated, right? Once I eat, when I'm hungry, I eat something and I'm not hungry anymore, does that mean that the core of my essence goes away? Right? And what's more than that, to go even, to add on something else even to that too, is this. I am defining I am now trapping myself. If I define myself by my desires, whatever that is, then I am narrowing myself. I am, in a sense, cutting myself into just one sliver of what I actually am. So let's just take an example. Let's say that I, Nate on the Stone, I define myself by my hunger and my love for fine cuisine, right? Well, what that means is that the whole core and essence of who I am revolves around food. And only food. It depends on only if I'm hungry or if I'm full. And am I in the mood for steak? Or am I in the mood for salmon? Or what I am like that. Don't you see that it narrows life down to such a shallow degree that you almost don't even become, you are almost not becoming human anymore in that sense. Because you become much more like an automaton. You become much more like a robot in that sense. Like, hey, this is my core directive. This is my primary programming. And therefore, this is all that I follow. Okay, those are just several reasons why making a desire is not only wrong, but it's enslaving. That's the real big takeaway. It is enslaving. We tell ourselves that it's freeing, but it's the exact opposite. And Buttigieg, who has swallowed this lie, hook, line, and sinker, has now reconfirmed it on this 9-year-old kid. And because society is the way it is, which reinforces this lie, now Zachery Ro is going to think that, because all of a sudden he decided at 9 years old that when he gets old enough, he wants to have sex with boys, that is his core defining feature. That is what makes him what he is. He has now been trapped into this tight box, right? Which there can't be any escape. Because the crazy thing about our society today is if you decide to say, no, I am more than just a desire. I am a human being. Therefore, I do not define myself by my sexual orientation. I do not define myself, by all these desires. Then all of a sudden, the communities, the connections that you made with people in whatever group or body that you are a part with, right? Like little Zachery Ro, he's going to be made a part of the LGBTQIA2+ community, right? Because of what happened at this rally in Aurora, Colorado. Well, if he suddenly decides when he grows up that, what, this is all a lie. I am more than this. A man is more than this. he can kiss all those connections, all those friendships, and everything goodbye. And society will cast him out like a leper. Because he actually had the gall to say that there's more to life than simply our desires. That's the real crime and the real radicalness of what Pete Buttigieg did. He shallowed human life generally, and specifically in the case of Zachery Ro. And that is why, here again, Pete Buttigieg reconfirmed that he is not only the most radical person who is running for president, but he is completely unsuited for the office for which he is running for. But that is story number 2.